Want to find great? Follow me. New listings. Whatever you're looking for, you'll find it on Yelp. Yelp has a range of great traders and suppliers.
Those are artists. Let me take you to the painters.
There you go.
Live from Johannesburg to the rest of the world. Hello and a very warm welcome to the very first episode of our Empower series. I'm your host, Gugulethu Mfuphi. Well, Telkom One and Telkom Business have taken this opportunity to bring to you the Empower series, Wisdom from Global Disruptors webinar, where we bring together industry giants and local business owners to have an interactive discussion about things that matter to us as entrepreneurs. Well, our guest speaker for today is Mark Cuban, entrepreneur, television personality, investor, as well as the owner of the basketball team, the Dallas Mavericks. Many of you might be familiar with him from Shark Tank in the US. Now, over the next 1 hour, we'll be probing his mind, sharing some insight regarding leadership, entrepreneurship, and of course, a few other things that he might just like, such as Netflix, Bitcoin, and of course, the world of cryptocurrencies. But for you as well, our Lucky 100 webinar attendees, you have the opportunity to pose your questions live to Mark today. These will be shared and discussed on this platform, but we also want to ensure that we want to get through as many questions as possible. So keep them coming through our Q&A box. However, we also want you to share in the limelight today and share some perspective as to who you are and where you are located as we speak to Mark in conversation over the next hour. Well, joining me now from a warm and very sunny Texas, as illustrated by the lovely calm T-shirt that you're wearing, Mr. Mark Cuban. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to do this.
I'm certainly excited to speak to you here today, and we're coming from a very sunny but not too warm Johannesburg. But I'm keen to get your thoughts, Mark, as we want to cross these Atlantic waters, interact from a continental perspective. I'm keen to gauge your thoughts as to what comes to mind when I mention South Africa to you. Are there specific opportunities? And I'm hoping that you're not going to say safari.
No, actually, I think rugby. I'm a big rugby fan. And so, I have some friends from South Africa that I played rugby with. So that's the first thing that comes to mind because they always remind me about it. But no, safari is not what comes to mind, but a beautiful country, really warm people. The diamond business comes to mind. So I've got, a lot of positive impressions from the people I know from South Africa that live here in the States.
Well, there's a lot that we have in common when you look at Texas as well as South Africa, one state almost equally to one economy here on the African continent. But South Africa also landed on your radar back in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, given an investment that you made in Veldskoen, one of the local shoe manufacturers here, and helping it gain some access and growth opportunities in the US and other markets in the UK. Perhaps shed some light, if you can, Mark, as to what the growth has been like and, of course, how it's performed, given that we've now shifted to moving into a pandemic.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a great backstory there. The entrepreneurs came on Shark Tank with a company called Slide, which is a one-handed kind of boogie board where you can go in the water and kind of surf with it. It's great exercise. It's a great competition. And they're really innovative entrepreneurs. And they brought the shoe company, which I can't even pronounce correctly, so I butcher it every time. So I'm not even going to try. But the shoes are incredibly comfortable. They're very fashionable. And they've really done an amazing job of creating a brand, taking the brand that was built in South Africa and bringing it here to the States. And their business is doing really, really well. It's actually swamped, literally, the Slide business. And so I give them a lot of credit. It's not easy to take a brand from another country and build it in the manner that they've done, but they've really been able to accomplish a lot.
Yeah, a lot has certainly been done, but I'll help you out with the pronunciation. It's Veldskoen, but we'll get there on another day, perhaps if today doesn't work. Indeed. Mark, I'm also keen, for many of us, we're probably exhausted by this conversation, but it's a reality that we're all faced with, right? Regardless of where you're located on the globe, and it has to be this particular pandemic. You're an entrepreneur, someone who is always keen to look out for business opportunities, but I'm keen to understand what the legacy of this pandemic has actually, how it's impacted your business and impacted your thoughts and thinking around innovative disruptions and investment opportunities.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it really depends on where you are in the world. During the growth in cases, as we were learning about the pandemic and suffering from it over the course of 2020 and through the first few months of 2021, particularly here in the United States, it was more a matter of how do you deal within a lockdown environment. And for businesses, the key word is always agility. Change is a constant in business. There's never a time when change isn't always happening. And so what I tried to do a couple things with the companies that I've been involved with during the pandemic. One was to tell them they had to be agile, that if your business was primarily, brick and mortar, you're going to have to move to online more so, no matter what the reasons were that kept you from doing it before. And obviously we saw a significant growth in online commerce. The second thing is, you have to be very communicative. You've got to be open and honest and authentic with all your stakeholders, your customers, your employees, your vendors, because they're scared too. They're afraid of what's going on. They're afraid of the uncertainty. They're afraid of the health risks, not just at work, but in their homes as well. And everybody had this communal experience of fear, and you couldn't pretend it didn't happen. You couldn't talk around it. You couldn't be misleading. You had to be very open and honest. And then I'll also add, typically businesses work from the top down. Historically, that's the way it's been. It was my company, so I give the orders, right? And I set the path for the company. But in the pandemic, then as in now, it's really more bottom up because it's the people that work for you that are on the front lines that can give you the best information from which to make decisions. They're talking to your customers and prospects. They're sharing their fears with them, and they're going to give you the best insights to how people perceive your company. And if you aren't a caring company, they're going to tell you that your customers aren't going to want to do business with you because they don't think you're taking into consideration, the reality of what's going on. And so, summarize, in the pandemic, you've got to be agile. You've got to make adjustments based on what's in front of you. You've got to communicate and be authentic and honest. And you really have got to change some habits as a leader and listen to the people on the front lines because they have far better information than you do.
That tells us quite a bit in terms of how leaders have had to change in terms of their thinking and how they operate many of their businesses. And I guess, again, speaking to the entrepreneur in you, you've been very optimistic as to how entrepreneurs, dare I say it, should not waste a good crisis. You've actually mentioned in previous articles, right, that this could be the resurgence of America 2.0 and the rebuilding of economies. But share with us some of your thinking as to how it is that entrepreneurs need to seek opportunities in this climate to really alter the economies within which we reside.
It's a great question. Where there's change, there's opportunity. And, people being locked down, people not being able to leave their homes or restricted in their movement, that's your chance to really use that time to create that business you always dreamed of. And any of us with that entrepreneurial spirit, no matter where we are in the world, that idea you have, why not go for it? This is the one time that you get to say, why not me? Why can't I be the one who changes an industry, who changes the world, who creates something that has an impact? Because, like I tell my kids, wherever we go, I tell them, just look around. Other than the things that are organic, the trees, the bushes, etc., everything was somebody's idea. There was a day where it didn't exist, and then the next day there it was. They took action based on their idea and their mission. And why not? Why can't my kids? Why can't you? Why can't your kids come up with the next idea that really has an impact? And the pandemic is the opportunity to do so. And now as it lingers on, I think when we're seeing more of those businesses. But I think I truly believe when we look back on this pandemic of 2021, 2020, we're going to realize that there were 10, 20, 30, 40 world-changing businesses that were created by somebody who was stuck in their flat, someone who was stuck in their house, someone who, was in a yard or a park by themselves thinking about how they could change the world.
And you're quite right? It speaks to ideas, it speaks to finding ways to change the world and changing the environments within which we operate. But Mark, as is often mentioned for many entrepreneurs, funding is that perennial bugbear. And for many entrepreneurs, before we do address some of the questions that have come through on the chat service, I do want to talk about funding. And if we find ourselves in an environment where we need to think about capital to fund these ideas in a different manner, given the current environment we're in.
Yeah, a couple things there. One, I always say sweat equity is the best equity. When you look at some of the largest, particularly non-manufacturing companies, they don't, most of them don't go out and raise money immediately. There's an entrepreneur or two or three, and she figures out a way to create a prototype or to offer her service and get a buyer locally. And the best way to get funding is to start your business first and start it small. When I started my first company after I got fired from a job, I literally had to go to potential customers and say, look, I have no money. I have the software concept and idea, and I know I can help you. If you'll front me the amount of the software, I promise you it will work. And if it won't work, I'll walk your dog, I'll mow your lawn, I'll wash your car, whatever it takes, if you'll get me started. And I started off really, really small. I had 5 roommates. I had no money, but I had effort. And most businesses, that's the way they start. And then as I grew it, fortunately, I grew it fast enough that I didn't need to raise capital. But, for other companies, once you have those first customers in place, once you have the first sales, it's far easier to raise capital. Don't put yourself in a situation where you think, okay, I have this idea, now I need to go raise money. Mm-hmm. The exact opposite. You need to find a way to either make a prototype or offer your service to inexpensively or even free to people close to you, or in your neighborhood, in your community, whatever it may be, because that's how you get started. Now, once you get there and you start looking for funding, then your best place to go, and I'm not literate on South Africa, but here in the States, there are usually groups of angel investors, either in your city or online, that you can start socializing the idea with and see where you can take it. And they'll give you great feedback. And so don't be afraid to talk about it. And let me just add, a lot of people get really fearful. Well, if I tell somebody, they're going to steal my idea. Yeah. The idea is always the easiest part. The hard part is executing on the idea and turning it into a business. And if that's what you're good at, if you can take that idea, productize it, servitize it, and turn it into a company, don't worry about them stealing it, because you're going to be moving so fast they'll never be able to catch you. So get out there and talk to people, network. It's a numbers game. Raising money is not easy because there are so many people looking to do it. So you're going to have to talk to a lot of people, and don't just get discouraged. There's not enough time in an hour for me to tell you how many times I've failed. But I can tell you this, it doesn't matter how many times you fail. You only have to be right one time.
It's interesting that you mentioned that part there, Mark, because we do have a question that's come in from one of our guests and viewers who's watching here today, building up on failure, but of course also understanding how you build onto success. And the question comes through from Michelle, and she asks, how many times did you fail before you eventually succeeded? But I think you've answered that partially, but perhaps elaborate deeper as to what shifts in your mindset after experiencing failure that has actually propelled you so much better to succeed.
Well, first I got fired from a bunch of jobs. And you get fired enough, you realize, I realized very quickly I wasn't a good employee. I was more entrepreneurial, and I couldn't just take orders, let's put it that way, and just follow the rules. And that was a problem for me. So that was my first failure, quote unquote. Then one of my first companies I started was a bar, literally a bar and restaurant. And I got it because I was just 21 by the time we closed, and I let in all my underage friends. So that was a failure. We had to close down. The next time, and then right after that, I started a company to sell powdered milk. To me, I was broke, right? And to me, anything that could save money on milk, I thought was a good idea. And what I would tell myself is, it doesn't have to taste as good as regular milk. Well, I learned a lesson. When people buy milk, powdered or not, they want it to taste as good as the original. And so I had so many failures. And even within my first company, I'll give you an example of failure. We had been in business about 18 months, 2 years, I forget exactly how long, and we had 84,000 US dollars in the bank. And I get a call from our bank telling me that someone had just driven through the drive-through at the bank and cashed $82,000 in checks. I'm like, that's strange. And he goes, well, the reason I'm calling you is the person who cashed it had whited out the payee. Remember the old typewriter whiteouts where you can white out something? And and typed in her name, and the bank cashed her checks. And as it turned out, this woman, her name was Renee Hardy, if you run into her in South Africa. Renee Hardy stole 82,000 of the $84,000 we had in the bank. So we went from a thriving, growing young company to effectively being broke, and going through the process of talking to our vendors and saying, look, these were our accounts payable checks, and I promise we'll pay you back. You're just going to have to be patient with us. Having them believe in us. That was a situation that could have been a horrible failure for us, but we turned it around, built better relationships with our vendors. It was difficult, I'm not going to lie, because that meant, I barely had enough to eat, enough to pay myself to eat, but we made it through, and that grew into a thriving company that we sold.
I must tell you that I did run out of fingers trying to count the failures that you highlighted, but one thing that is quite encouraging is certainly how you mentioned the sense of resilience.
Yeah, you have to be resilient. You are going to fail. If this was easy, everybody would do it. Everybody would be a successful entrepreneur. You will fail. Nobody gets it completely right the first time. Maybe your failures will be smaller. Maybe your failures will be bigger. But the one thing you need to do is you need to learn from it. The best lessons I got that helped me grow my businesses and be successful were the things I learned from failing, were the things I learned from working for companies that were failures. It's just, wherever you can find knowledge, you have to grab it, because one of the greatest traits of every entrepreneur is that they always keep on learning, because business is ever changing and you have to keep on learning.
Very powerful element that you mentioned there, keep on learning. Well, I'll tell you what, Mark, we did promise many of our 100 webinar participants that they have the opportunity to interact with you today, and they are doing exactly that. There's a key and very interesting question that's come through from Gareth Forbes, and he asks, Mark, if you were transplanted to Africa with none of the resource networks and means that you have currently, with only your knowledge, access to the internet, and $1,000 US, what would you do? What business would you start? What opportunities would you be looking at? Tough question, but happy for you to respond.
Yeah, easy question for me, actually. The first thing I would do, I would get a job so I could pay my bills. Doesn't matter what the job is, doesn't matter what time it is that I have to work. If it was a 9 to 9 job, if it was a 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. job, I would get a job and I would live like a student. I would have as many roommates as it took. I don't care if I was 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 years old. And if I had to find a place to try to make some money right now with my savings, I think it would be with cryptocurrencies. And I wouldn't just start buying Bitcoin or Ethereum, but I think right now we're at a unique point in time in the crypto industry that very much reminds me of the mid-90s with the internet industry, where there were so many new up-and-coming companies and platforms and networks back then. The same thing is happening now. And I would use something called decentralized finance to try to make some money on top of my money as much as I can. And so that would be my initial approach. And once I got to the point where I could leave my job and still pay my bills, that'd be probably when I'd start a company, and it'd probably be something sales driven. I'd find something I can sell, start, without having to raise any capital, and just start building a company from there.
I must say a very cautious overview that you provided, but one that really does speak to the necessities one needs. Get a job, get the sense of security, understand the environment, and then execute from there into the entrepreneurial opportunities that exist. There's another question that we have from one of our guests who's watching online, from Axel Collins. And Mark, this question asks, what was the toughest decision you ever had to make?
The hardest thing is always firing people, particularly if they're your friends. When I've started companies back in the day, typically I'd hire people that I knew and I trusted because I didn't know how to hire. And there were times in my first company, I was very fortunate in that of the 80 employees, I think we had when I sold the company. All 80 of, I only had one person ever leave the company, and that person came back to work with us, months later.
Wow.
And so I didn't have to do it in the first company, but my second company I did. And there's nothing I hate worse, whether it was in, broadcast.com, my second company, or now with the Dallas Mavericks. Firing people is just brutal.
Can't be easy. It does impact on livelihoods and on people that you know. But I do want to pick up on two elements that you alluded to earlier. You touched on cryptos, which we know you love, and there's been a lot of attention on cryptos at the moment. And what's been interesting to also witness, Mark, is that there are more central banks globally who are taking a concerted effort to actually consider this as a means of payment, as being regulated and accepted as a form of payment within their markets. How do you see this unfolding? You mentioned that we are perhaps on the precipice of a major change and evolution, but are certain markets more uniquely positioned to take advantage of cryptocurrencies and the effectiveness of blockchain?
I think everybody's in a position to take advantage of cryptocurrencies. And when I say that, I don't mean necessarily to speculate, hey, go buy some Bitcoin because the price is going up, or buy Ethereum because it's better and the price is going up. Nothing like that at all. I'll tell you a quick story. When in 1995, actually late 94, early 95, my friend Todd Wagner came to me, and in my first company, we did local and wide area network and database technology. And he said, you know what? There's this brand new thing called the internet. I'm like, I know there's the internet, Todd. It's brand new, but I'm a tech geek, remember? And he goes, there's got to be a way we can use this new thing called the internet to listen to our Indiana University, where I went to college, and listen to their basketball games. We were in Dallas, they were in Indiana, and there was no real way to do it. And I'm like, that's a great idea. Let me figure it out. And that's exactly what we did. And that was the start of the streaming industry. And the point is, it was brand new. And when I told people what we wanted to do, we wanted to use this new thing called the internet so that people can listen and eventually watch anything online. People laughed at me. They laughed at me. They said, you idiot, I'll just turn on a radio. I'll just turn on a TV. What do I need to go to the internet? Because back then, it was very, very complicated. Now we take Netflix streaming, you just click and it just shows up on your phone, laptop, TV, whatever it is. But back then, in order to stream 26 years ago, you had to have a PC, a dial-up modem, a TCP/IP connection, a dial-up internet provider. You had to have a media player, and you had to go to a website that allowed all this stuff to work. And that was complicated, but we knew it would be simple over some period of time. Cryptocurrencies are very similar. It seems very complicated right now when we talk about blockchain, when we talk about smart contracts, when we talk about all the different types of crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Polygon. I mean, the list is just endless. And just like back in 1995, every day there was a new website that seemed to pop up to start a new business. Now there seems to be a new cryptocurrency. But the entrepreneurs who took the time to understand and learn how the internet worked, to learn the basics, HTML, JavaScript, all the, just networking and just how all the pieces came together. Those are the ones that created businesses that were just stunning and changed the game. And we saw the same thing, with the advent of the iPhone in the App Store. We saw a surge of applications, right? Everybody had an idea for an app because, oh my goodness, I'm going to be the next Snapchat. I'm going to be the next Facebook. I'm going to be the next whatever. Yeah. Same thing's happening now with cryptocurrency. But what I'll tell you is, don't look at it from a point of speculation. Think of it as you would any other business, any other technology. Get in there and learn about it. Learn as much as you can about the different blockchains. Learn as much as you can about smart contracts. Because then what happens, you will come up with the ideas to build businesses on the platforms that you think work best for you. Just like we looked at the internet and said, what kind of ideas can we come up with? Let's come up with the idea of putting audio and then video over the internet, which everybody thought was crazy and nobody really understood. Those types of applications can be created right now. And the cool thing about it is that it's cheaper. If you have access, if you learn blockchain, if you learn smart contracts, any of them, right? It's cheaper and easier to build a company using crypto than it is in a traditional sense, because people the network is already there. You don't have to pay for cloud services. You don't have to pay for security. There's so many advantages. So that's a long-winded way of saying that cryptocurrencies aren't just about speculation. That's all fun and interesting, like speculating on stocks, right? But at the same time, if you take the time to learn and you have aspirations to build a business, if I were going to start a new business today, it would certainly be a technology business built on top of one of the blockchains that are out there.
You've given us a lot of information to really absorb there, and it really does help us in terms of understanding which markets to move into. But you've also given us, I guess, some room to discuss future opportunities that you might be identifying within the crypto environment. As you said, if you could start a business today, it would be technology-based. Are you perhaps identifying any opportunities to invest within the technology space or in digital currencies or digital payment platforms?
Oh yeah, for certain. If you want to see the companies that I'm invested in, just go to www.markcuban.com. So I list them all right there. And actually, I wrote a blog post on the way I'm thinking about investments in the crypto asset world. So if you go to blogmaverick.com, I just posted it 2 days ago, and you can get some of my feelings there. And effectively, where I'm looking, I look at valuing crypto businesses very much like I value traditional businesses. Do they generate revenue? How do they generate revenue, and how big do I think they can grow? And that's based off the quality and impact of their services. And, whether it's, again, Bitcoin, which is a store of value, it's kind of a digital gold, which has interesting implications for South Africa for obvious reasons. If you're a country that mines a lot of gold and that's a core industry, how is Bitcoin going to impact it as an alternative? Honestly, I don't think I think it's going to take business away from gold as an investment, as a store of value over the next 10 years. I think you'll see less investment in gold than you do see in Bitcoin. And the reason for that is very simple. When people invest in gold, very rarely do they take possession of it. And so for 99% of the people that deal with gold, other than for the jewelry and industrial implications, it's digital anyways. It's just the equivalent of a cryptocurrency because they never touch it. Maybe they have a coin, but most people don't. They buy an ETF or they buy some other form of fund in order to get access to gold. Bitcoin is going to be no different. And, there's a lot of discussion of impact of Bitcoin on the environment. Well, that'll evolve to more clean energy, but there's no question that the mining of gold also has an impact, a negative impact on the environment as well. And so there's going to be a lot of competing narratives, a lot of competing facts, but it's going to be really interesting in how it plays out, particularly in South Africa, where so much gold is mined.
That is such an interesting analogy, and you're quite right. It does hit close to home for us here in South Africa, looking at those two discrepancies about the opportunities that exist there, Mark. But Mark, I do want to keep the audience questions coming through, and this time around, Jeremy has shared a question with us. He asks, how are you changing your strategy and companies in the film industry to deal with the new so-called studios such as Netflix, Amazon, and Apple? I believe you've touched on this briefly, but perhaps elaborate further as to how it is that you're changing your studios and an update on the media entities you own.
Yeah, first, I've sold most of my media entities, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. It is a hard business that I wasn't very good at. I'll tell you a quick story. Back in 2004, I got an email from a gentleman by the name of Alex Gibney. He was is a director. And he said, I've got all this film footage from a company called Enron, which had gone out of business, right? And it was a big scandal. And he was like, we can turn this into a documentary. I emailed him back. How much does it cost? $770,000. I'm like, let's do it. All this took place in 12 minutes. That green light movie became Enron, the smartest guys in the room. I got nominated for an Academy Award. A couple months later, my partner Todd brings me a movie that's starring George Clooney. It's called Good Night and Good Luck. Gets nominated for 6 Academy Awards. Thinking to myself, this business is easy. We've got this down. You haven't heard of a movie that I've done since. And so, I realized that the industry is changing. There are some people, there are some companies that are really good at creating content. Netflix, Disney, among others. Our companies were not them, and we also owned a big film theater chain called Landmark. And, with the advent of streaming and bigger screens and more people, particularly during the pandemic, having to stay home, we just felt like that was the time to the film industry, that it was going to be very, very, very difficult. And it brings up an interesting, bigger question for entrepreneurs or business people in general. Is there ever a time just to get out? And one of the things about entrepreneurs is we lie to ourselves. We tell ourselves it's going to be great. There's nothing wrong. I'm the best. My business is the best. I'm the best at this. We lie to ourselves to no end. And at some point, you have to have some self-awareness as an entrepreneur and be brutally honest with yourself and say, look, is it time to close? Not that I ever want a business to close, but it happens at times. And with our media businesses, it was time to sell. When I looked at what I perceived to be the future, I didn't think I had the skill sets, or we had, as an organization, had the skill sets to really compete the way we wanted to and to really be a top-notch, successful organization. And look, I could have lied to myself and said, oh, no, I'll figure it out. There are a lot of people who are depending on me. And sometimes as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, you have to be brutally honest. And this is one of those times.
Interesting factor in terms of being brutally honest, and really does call for realistic conversations that need to take place with self as well as the staff that you employ. Thanks for that heads up there, Mark. And perhaps on at the opposite end, a question that comes through from Taryn, one of our participants in today's webinar. She builds up on the theme and understanding of ideas that we shared a moment ago. The question asks, good ideas are a dime a dozen, but acting them is rare. Why do you think so many fail to get their ideas off the ground and actioned? And what do you think people need to change in their behavior to do so? Very important question here, Mark.
Yeah, great question, Taryn. Incredible question. Being an entrepreneur is hard. And I think people romanticize the idea of owning your own business. It must be miserable to work for somebody else. Trust me, as much as I love being an entrepreneur and hated working for somebody else, there's days I wish I did work for somebody else, because there's a lot of responsibility and there's a lot of stress that comes with it. And it's a lot of work. You typically have hours that you're assigned when you work for somebody else. With the entrepreneur, I say this all the time, business is the ultimate sport, and you have to compete 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, times 365 days a year. And you don't know who your competition always is. It could be, Taryn starting up a business that just wants to, take over one of my companies. And so, as a startup entrepreneur, and we talk about executing on your idea or your business plan, it takes a commitment beyond anything you ever imagined. You have to be able to sell. You have to be the best salesperson in your organization. You have to be able to strategize. You have to know where you want to take your company. You have to be very aware and basically, and in your industry, how are you going to impact your industry? How are your competitors going to respond? You have to be the ultimate expert in what your customers want and delivering it to them. That's a lot of things that you have to do and execute on, and they are not easy. And as you start to grow beyond just yourself, you have to figure out how to hire people. And once you get to that third, fourth, and fifth employee, then you start thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, I'm a manager. And I have to not only hire, but I have to manage them. And at some point, you get to the point where it's not just about you, it's about them first. And so these are all things that come into play when you try to execute on your business idea, and they're not easy. And I think a lot of people get overwhelmed and just give up, because it's a lot more than they expected. And sometimes it is easier, and it's not for everyone, but sometimes it's just better to go back to that daily job that you once had. And because the grass is not always greener on the entrepreneurial side.
It's a lot of hard work, a lot of slog, as you mentioned, and you need to know how to sell. There is a question from Karabo that I want us to follow up on, but there's a theme that you've been known for, and that's selling. There's a passion behind selling that you often advocate for, and you've mentioned it twice in our conversation thus far. And I guess building up on the theme of entrepreneurs, people who need to be actionable about their ideas, are good salespeople born or made?
Neither. I really think that, if you love your product, selling is not convincing, selling is helping. And if you really love your product, you're helping somebody by making it available to them. And, for any company I've started or participated with, if I didn't think the product or service was able to help somebody, I wouldn't have invested. And so if you're going to start a company, you have to ask yourself, do I love this product or service so much that I know I'm helping my friends, my family, my community, my industry when I'm selling this product? If you can't answer yes, then it's going to be hard to sell. Nobody wants to sell a product they don't believe in. And you've got to be able to believe in it. So for me, learning how to sell was never about convincing. So the way I always have sold is I try to understand what my prospect or customer truly needs for their business, what they truly need for their lives. And if I can help them find that, if my product or service can help them accomplish that, it's easy. All I have to do is say, hey, check this out. Here's what it does, and here's why it's great for you. And the customer appreciates that I understand their needs, and I appreciate selling it because I'm helping them. If you're in a circumstance where you think you have to fudge a little bit, maybe not tell the complete truth, maybe try to over-convince, then you have to ask yourself if you truly believe what you're saying and what you're selling.
A very important point there, as you said, not about convincing, but meeting the need of clients there. And that builds in very nicely into a question we have from one of our viewers today, Garabo, who asks, what's the best book on innovation and a startup? A book that you recommend for someone starting out and looking to build $1 million business?
Well, first, I'll tell you to read my book, How to Win at the Sport of Business.
Look at you selling right there, Mark.
Always, baby, always. Here's one of the books that I'm reading right now that I like, The Secret Lives of Customers. And so I just started to read it, so I can't say it's great, but so far so good. Basically any book about business that looks interesting to you, any biography about a business person that looks interesting to you, you're always going to be able to pick up a tidbit. I mean, back in the day when we used to go to bookstores, I used to sit in bookstores all day long going through magazines and books, because all it takes is one little tidbit, one little spark that helps you in your business, and it's worth it. And so spend that time to read business journals, to read business newspapers, to read whatever business books you can, whatever blogs or posts that you can read, because all it takes is one little spark of a thought where you say, oh my goodness, that was the one thing I needed, that was the one thing I couldn't think of. And the fact that you're looking for that, the fact that you're putting in the time to find it, gives you an edge over 99% of the people out there, because most people don't put in the time.
It's about the research in the background, and as you say, the time and the effort to ensure that one is fully equipped to capture that particular market. Great illustration there of.
Right. Let me just add, sorry. It never ends. It doesn't matter how. I spend 3-4 hours a day sometimes just learning. If I'm going to sit here and talk about crypto, I've got to know what I'm talking about. I need to understand blockchain. I need to understand smart contracts. Whatever industry I'm getting involved in, I just dive in head first, learn everything that I possibly can, because I know most people will not. And if they don't and I do, that gives me such a huge competitive advantage. And every entrepreneur and CEO can, or anybody for that matter, can do the same thing. If you're willing to put in the time, if you're willing to always be learning every single day, and you just put in so much more time than anybody, you're going to find yourself with a significant edge.
Yeah, indeed, putting in that research. Well, you touched on cryptos, and we know that you know quite a bit about it. You've been vocal about it too, and it seems as though our audience wants to know more about your thoughts on cryptocurrencies and their role as a payment model. And this question comes from Martin. The question asks, what's your view on cryptocurrencies' role as the payment mode of choice for bad actors, from ransomware hackers to kidnappers? Will this potentially be its downfall?
Well, it's interesting because historically cash has been used for the bad actors. And the one thing about cash is that it's not traceable at all. And the other thing about it is we all carry it at some point, and it makes us all vulnerable at some level. With crypto, for bad actors, it's the exact opposite. Even though cryptocurrencies are anonymous, every transaction is public on the blockchain. So where we've seen ransomware, when a company pays out in crypto, they deliver it to a crypto wallet. And that wallet address is available to authorities. And what they're doing now is they track and they trace those wallet addresses, even though there's some approaches where you can try to mix and match and distribute them, and automate it being distributed. you can still, you can reverse engineer that. So although you may not know exactly who the perpetrators of that bad act, you're going to be able to follow those crypto funds as they leave the wallet. And there's circumstances where that, in case of an oil company here in the States, they were able to recover the money. In other cases, they've been able to, even though they don't know who the bad actor is, they've been able to lock the wallet. And so, it works sometimes, but as authorities become more and more well-versed on how to deal with it, it's going to become less and less effective. And it's still certainly a better option and a safer option than cash or bearer bonds or other equivalents, because there's just no way to trace them.
Mm-hmm. So a vote of confidence there as the world becomes more receptive to it and understanding how to use these technologies adequately. Thank you for that response there, Mark. We have another question that's come through from Dumelo. This question asks, what do you think about the push for the world to move away from hydrocarbons and into the green economy? Are these calls unfair on hydrocarbon-rich developing countries? And maybe that's also alluded to countries like South Africa. We know that climate change has also been a major focus for global leaders. But what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm a strong proponent of green energy and renewable energy. I can't speak specifically to hydrocarbons. I'm not well versed in that industry, so I'll just say this right here. But yeah, I'm a big proponent. I have 3 kids, 11, 14, and 17, and I hope someday they have kids that'll get to be 11, 14, and 17, and I want the world to be environmentally safe for them. And I don't think we're on the right path right now. We'll see what happens, but I'm certainly a proponent of green and renewable energy.
Mm-hmm. I guess just as a brief follow-up on my end regarding that question, are you cognizant of the investments that you're making in the current environment, and do they link to the overriding theme of decarbonization, ESG, and environmental sustainability, Mark?
Without question. It's a question we ask of all the companies. We buy carbon offsets for the Dallas Mavericks and others, so it's certainly something that's important and that we pay attention to.
Fantastic. Well, we build up on your thoughts on all things investments, and this one requests you to put your trading hat on from Jaishan. The question asks, what do you think about Michael Burry shorting Tesla for $530 million? Tell us a little bit more about this transaction and your thought there.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously it's risky, and I understand both sides of the Tesla trade. On one hand, you're investing in the future. And the other hand, if you're short, then you're looking at the fundamentals and price to earnings ratio. The challenge for anybody shorting a stock like Tesla is that we're in a near zero interest rate environment. And it's very difficult to short stocks in that environment because, investors typically don't have many places to put their money. Mm-hmm. You can put it in cryptocurrencies, you can put it in stocks, but you're not going to put it in the bank if you can at all avoid it. And so because of that, stocks don't trade at historical valuations. And the thought process behind buying stocks like Tesla, investors willing to take more risks and be more lenient, hoping that over the long haul, Elon Musk will make his investors more money than the 0.2% interest that investors will earn in the bank. And so I think it's a very difficult short. Not to say it won't work, because what the short sellers won't tell you in a trade like that is whether or not they trade in and out. I think we immediately have the perception that a short seller is shorting Tesla and they're going to hold it for a long time. Mm-hmm. Probably not, because Tesla is a high market cap stock. $500 million is a lot of money, but not relative to the cap and trading volume of Tesla. So it's not difficult for somebody to trade in and out of that stock.
We see why you were regular on some of the business channels in the United States, right? Sharing your thoughts and opinions on some of the investment outlooks that we witness. Well, we follow up with another question from our audience members who have been so cooperative. We're really excited to see all this energy and the questions that you've been sharing. Mark, this next question is from Katie. The question asks, how important is it to ensure that you are targeting the right market? Can I almost close enough, or do I need to be pinpoint accurate?
Well, that's a great question, Katie. The more accurate, more pinpoint accurate that you can be, the more likely your prospects are going to say yes. Sometimes pre-internet or pre-SEO, search engine optimization, you had to do a lot of spray and pray, meaning you have to try to sell to as many different prospects as possible, hoping some will say yes. Now you can pinpoint a lot more distinctly to your customers using Facebook and LinkedIn and Google and Twitter and whatever. So you want to educate yourself as much as you can on search engine optimization. And if you're not selling online, then you're going to have to survey your potential customers and find out how they like to be sold to. Because the one thing that's certain with every product, customers are going to buy how they want, where they want, when they want. And if you don't deliver it to them in that manner, they're not going to buy from you.
Very true there. And interesting questions come through from Michael, and I guess putting on your business trader, investment analyst hat again here, Mark. And the questions from Michael. Interesting one, especially given how things have turned around when it comes to the price of Brent crude. But he asks, any reason for oil to be around $71 per barrel, where it's been between 50 to 60 for the last 4 years? I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this one, especially given the environment we're in.
Yeah, a couple things there, but the most important one is you always have to change your valuation metrics when you have zero interest rates. So that's one thing, because that increases speculation. Like we saw the price of lumber go flying up, and then the price of lumber came stumbling down very quickly and was down for 8, 9, straight days. And when it comes to crude, there's other issues as well. Obviously, how quickly do we come out of the pandemic? Because that's going to get more people creating commerce and driving cars, using transportation. So that's going to be one thing. And then, there's other issues as well where we don't quite know where shortages are happening and how they're happening. The supply chains of a lot of different industries have struggled because, a lot of manufacturing is done in China, and it's been very difficult for a variety of reasons to get core products or to get core manufacturing ingredients. And so that's created challenges for the delivery of products over sea, over air, and that's also led to the increase in the price of oil, because companies that need to do transportation are competing for that oil and trying to lock it up. We're seeing airplane transport, people traveling by airplane, those numbers are increasing dramatically as well, and that's competition. So it makes sense that the price of oil has gone up recently as we try to figure out, what the best way to come out of the pandemic is. And because we haven't quite figured it all out, there's uncertainty, and when there's uncertainty, prices go up.
Indeed. Going back to the supply and demand dynamics, I bet you'll be watching the Fed later this evening and getting clarity in terms of their interest rate approach.
Of course.
Indeed. Mark, we do have a few. Sure, go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
Perfect. I was saying we do have a few questions that we do want to follow up on. And Dumelo is one of those. And it's a follow-up from a previous question that we had from Dumelo. This question asks, do you consider global warming priority number 1 in the world? If not, what is the biggest problem in the world right now?
I would say the pandemic's the biggest problem in the world right now, because we have to get past it. Or that just cascades into much worse issues. I'd say global warming is a close second behind that in terms of macro issues for the globe. And there really isn't anything that is close to it. A lot of people try to put the economy ahead of global warming. In the short term, but long term, as I said, if I try to visualize what the world's going to be like for my kids and their kids, 2 generations out, it's very, very difficult not to think that global warming won't have the greatest impact on the world they live in.
Very true. Environmental and health elements having an impact on lives and livelihoods, which is quite important there, Mark. Mark, we've got one more question that's come through from Kensani here in Johannesburg. And I guess allowing us to understand more about Mark, the person, right, who has also been an actor who played himself on Entourage, right? Tell us about that particular experience, I guess. Kensani is quite keen to understand more there.
Yeah, it was funny. And actually, I'm doing Doug Ellen, who is the producer and director. I'm doing his podcast there next week. So one day I got the ability to do a cameo where I played myself on Entourage in season 7. And I got there, did my little bit, and they're like, you know what? We have this idea for a storyline built around Avion Tequila. And they're like, would you like to come back for other episodes? I'm like, hell yeah, I would. That would be great. And so all of a sudden I'm acting with these amazing actors and, all the guys and on Entourage. It was just such an amazing, amazing experience. And it's funny, for all the things I've done when I travel around the world, Entourage shows in so many different countries that's the one thing people bring back up. And the show and the movie itself, being in the movie was a blast as well.
Yeah. Well, it certainly sounds as though you've lived a very full life there, Mark, and I perhaps want to build up on that and ask you a question in terms of living a full life as an entrepreneur, right? So often people are very focused on the success of the entities that they want to build, that they run, and taking those particular opportunities to greater scale. But how is it that you have found, I guess, tips and tools in your life to run your family life quite effectively? You touched on your 3 kids earlier, and you quite vocal about the future world that we need to create for them to live in. But how have you ensured that, aside from Mark Cuban, the entrepreneur and the investor, that you're still Mark the dad, Mark the husband, and Mark the friend that a lot of people might refer to you as?
And, just to be brutally honest, when I was in my 20s, I had no balance. When I was in my 30s, I had no balance. I was all business all the time, and I didn't develop relationships other than, with, potential spouses, if you will. I had girlfriends, but it was always, okay, it's my business first. And I was always honest about it. My first company, I went 7 years without taking a vacation. And I didn't have the balance, but my goal was to be able to put myself in a position where I didn't have to work, where I didn't have to worry about paying my bills. I didn't have to worry about my credit cards being cut up or my electricity being turned off, as happened. And when I got to the point where I could be that, balance became very important. And as my kids became older, I got a lot smarter. Well, in the eyes of my 17-year-old daughter, I got a lot dumber. But, I got smarter in that I wanted to spend a lot more time with them. And so I'm blessed. I'm so fortunate in that I can afford to set my own schedule and determine how much time, I'll spend as much time as they'll allow me to spend with them, if you will. And so I've been really fortunate. But everybody, if I were doing it again and I had a family younger, I'd schedule my family just like I did any business appointment. If I always managed to find time to put in a customer, to get a customer on my schedule. And if I was able to do that, I should be able to do the same thing with my kids, even if it's just taking them out to lunch or dinner or having a family dinner, or trying to be home. I traveled a lot, but I still always try to make a point to get back home as quickly as possible. If you make it a priority, it works. And having that, I'm in a lot of stressful businesses, but the one thing that makes me calm down is a hug from my kids, or just hearing them call me dad. There's no substitute for that, and it's really something special.
Yeah, that is incredibly refreshing to hear, Mark, I must say, because it does add to the quality of life that we all want to live, right? Many people have said that as entrepreneurs, you can outsource a lot of skills and abilities, the admin, the finance role, the marketing, a cook, a driver, and someone else to take care of a few other things. But you cannot substitute and outsource the role that you play in the lives of those who are important to you, especially in the time of health and well-being that we need to be mindful of. Mark, we do have one more question from our audience members before we get to an exciting segment of the show, which is our quick fire question. And this question comes in from Carla. It says, you are one of the few billionaires that believe in taxing the rich. That must make you unpopular amongst your peers. But do they ever confront you about this?
Well, let me just tell you something. I don't have any billionaire friends. I know some, right? But they're not my close friends. My friends are the kids I grew up with, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, from grade school and high school, the ones I played rugby with in college, the ones that I went to college with. My friends, when I first moved to Dallas, we're all still good friends. Those are the people I talk to. So there's no billionaire club. There's no billionaire handshake. There's no billionaire group chat. I don't care what they think. I could care less what they think. I just try to be honest and just try to do the right thing. I don't always get there. I'm not always right, but I'm certainly going to try. And in a world where there are people who have so much less, who face so many challenges, I'm not worried about my next dollar. I'm worried more about, again, the world that my kids will live in, and will they be able to enjoy their lives like I did. And money, is important. You can't lie about that. it takes away a lot of stress. But at the same time, you have to recognize when there's people that have less, what can you do to help them?
Very important element, you mentioned that. We've got another question that also builds up on people and I guess skills and abilities that we want to build up on. And Tyrone has asked a very unique question, which is quite important for us here, I guess, on the tip of the African continent. The question asks, education is of major importance in our country. What advice would you give to someone trying to capitalize on that?
Boy, Tyrone, that's a hard question. You know, the culture of education is different from community to community, let alone country to country. And what I would suggest is if you have a way to do it better, share it. You know, and again, this is one of those circumstances where a lot of people think they have a better way to do education, but it's very difficult to it's hard for that to be true sometimes, right? Because you have to convince a lot of people that your way is better. So you've just got to take those steps, Tyrone. If you have a better way, share it with people. See what happens. Find a local school. See if it works, because we all want to improve the education of our children.
Indeed. Building the future that we want them to thrive in there, Mark. Thank you so much for that response. And of course, to our audience for sharing some of your questions. Very pertinent questions that many of you asked. And I trust that you've received the necessary feedback from Mark that will leave you enlightened and thinking a lot more critically about many of the themes that we've mentioned. But Mark, I must tell you, I'm quite excited. We're within the last 5 minutes of this webinar and we want to shift gears and add some more excitement to it. So I'm excited that you're rubbing your hands because that's exactly what we're going to do.
Let's go.
Exactly. We'll roll with the quick fire questions that we have. And this is really just for us to get a quick response to some of the key themes that you've highlighted over the last hour. And of course, a few other interesting insight that you might be able to share with us. But I think the first question from my part is, what was the position that you played as a rugby player?
I played 8-man, wing forward and 8-man, because I wasn't fast enough to play in the backs. I wasn't big enough to play, you know, up front in the scrum, but I loved to pick up the ball and run, even when my teammates hated it. So I loved rugby. I played for a long time.
Oh, fantastic. Did you have a hero when you were younger?
Yeah, Julius Erving. That was my basketball hero, and then Ted Turner was my entrepreneurial hero.
Do you get bored easily?
Yes. Yes. You've got to hold my attention. If it doesn't mentally stimulate me, I'm out.
Cats or dogs, Mark?
Dogs.
Dog person. That's refreshing. Who do you admire in the business world as well as in life generally?
I do admire Warren Buffett, and I admire him because he always spends time learning. I've had ice cream with him 3 or 4 times, and talking to him it's amazing because of his life experiences that he's willing to share. But even more amazing is, I think, you know, he's in his 90s now, and he works just as hard at learning new things as he did 40 years ago. And that's just so impressive, and I look up to him for that.
Very interesting fact there. Your favorite holiday spot, Mark?
The Cayman Islands.
Oh, beautiful. How would you describe your leadership style?
Hands off to a fault sometimes, encouraging, demanding, and goal oriented.
What are your current ambitions?
To spend time with my kids and you know, be part of their lives, more part of their lives as much as they'll let me, and to keep on learning so that eventually I'll do something that truly impacts the world. I feel like I'm just getting started. That, yeah, you know, I've accomplished a few things, but I haven't done my best work yet. So I'm just a rookie trying to find my way, and hopefully I will.
A rookie, but do you believe in luck as a rookie at all, Mark?
Yeah, of course I do. Look, to be a billionaire, you have to be lucky. I don't care what anybody says. You take any billionaire on the planet, you know, unless they inherited it, they're not going to just go out there and be able to do it again. I was lucky in that the company I started building around the internet was at a time when internet stocks went crazy. There's billionaires I know in the cryptocurrency industry. They didn't plan for Bitcoin to go from $1 to, you know, $40,000 or whatever today, right? It was luck. You know, maybe they had the foresight to anticipate that it may go there, but the fact that it did, That's luck. I truly believe that someone can become a millionaire if they work hard. But to become a billionaire, you've got to get lucky.
A little bit of luck there. Mark, such a pleasure engaging with you today. You've really shared amazing insight and key nuggets for us to be mindful of as we continue in our journeys, either as employees of entities that we work for, as entrepreneurs looking to change the landscape that we live in, and as individuals who just want to make a positive contribution to society overall. We really thank you for participating today and for engaging with us. That's Mark Cuban, who's given us his time and, of course, shared a bit of his mind with us in this conversation. But we also want to thank you, our participants and individuals who've joined us by watching this amazing webinar and, of course, choosing to watch on Telkom One. Now, this live stream webinar will be added to the Telkom One platform directly after this event, and the website address is www.telkomone.tv. Well, we trust that you've certainly enjoyed the conversations that we've had with you today and, of course, gained a lot more insight. Keep coming back for further updates and insights. Until next time, take care.
Want to find great? Follow me. New listings. Whatever you're looking for, you'll find it on Yep. Yep has a range of great traders and suppliers.
Those are artists. Let me take you to the painters.
There you go.